Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're back again. We're working on the last of the reels that Nick sent in. Yesterday, or whenever I published these, I did a 4200 SS spin fisher. Nice little reel, ultra light, freshwater reel. We took it apart. We showed you how it was made and serviced, cleaned it up, and put it back together again so that Nick can take that fishing. And today we're going to do the 4300 SS. Now, most of the time, it's pretty much safe to say if you saw one, you saw the other, but it's not. And it's kind of curious for the designs of these two. The 4200 internal design is not the same as the 4300. So, as you can generally think, they would be consistent in their design. The only thing is that the pieces and parts would get a little bit bigger as they moved up the line. This one has a completely different anti-reverse system, so I thought it would be worthwhile to do the video on the Spin Fisher 4300, just in case there are folks out there that watched the 4200, decided to open up the 4300, and saw that it was just absolutely completely different internally, and kind of did a shrug of the shoulders. So let's go ahead and do this then. We're going to start by taking off the external parts. Now on the 4300, the spool does share the same type of design. It has the preset for your drag, so that you can just remove the spool and never have to worry about the drag preset. You can just take that off, interchange. We'll show you how to service this anyway in case you didn't watch the 4200. And internally up top, it's pretty much the same in terms of the rotor, but underneath it gets different. So we're going to take the handle off. That goes by turning in a clockwise rotation. The side plate is coming off from the other side of the handle, and there are of screws that hold that on. So while we're doing this, just a couple of things to note. You did see me put the pieces into a parts tray. I generally always use a parts tray. From time to time I'll lay some pieces on the table if I know that I'm going to put them right back on the reel. But generally speaking, I like to keep a parts tray so that I know where all the pieces and parts are, and I can access them easily when I go to reinstall. The second thing you'll notice is I'm wearing a glove. I like to keep the oils and greases and the like off my hands. It is a good way to stay clean, and also if there's any contaminants in there, that you don't wind up getting them all over you. And lastly, I've been working during this pandemic to put projects together to show you how to do these reels if you happen to be at home. If maybe you're not unable to go fishing. He just reopened fishing for us recently, but if you're unable to go fishing, then this is a chance for you to go see those. And if you happen to be a first responder or essential personnel, then I want to take the time to thank you on this video, as I've been trying to do. Without your efforts, we'd be in a whole lot worse place than we are today. Really do appreciate you putting your lives on the line to help us all get through this, to maintain the supply chain and sources for the products we need, and for taking care of those that get sick from this virus and are hospitalized or otherwise. Your efforts are saving lives daily, and we do appreciate that. So on we go. Now we're going to lube the bearing in the case. There's no need to remove it. Just give it a good bath. And you can see now, internally, this is an entirely different design than the 4200 design. So the 4300 changes things. This pretty much goes back to a traditional spin fisher design. It has the spiral gear, main gear. It has a different anti-reverse, kind of back to the 700 series type of a design. I'm going to take those 4 screws. I laid them on the table because one of those screws, you can see this one, is shorter than the others, and you need to make a note of where that screw came from. I made a note of it. It comes out of this side right here, in case you didn't make a note, which is another reason or another point to make during this. Take pictures along the way. go get the schematic. That schematic is available at mysticparts.com. It'll show you an exploded view of how this reel comes together, so that if you get stuck along the way, you can go back and reference it. And also, if you need parts, it's also a source for the parts, as they are a Penn Parts authorized distributor. Okay, a couple of things going on here. Main gear, the crosswind that makes the axle go up and down is actually driven from the front of this. There's an anti-reverse sitting behind this assembly, which we'll show you. You have a crosswind arm coming off of that connects to the shaft, and that's driven off of this a stud on this crosswind block. So completely different engineering than the 4200 that was done recently. I'm going to start by removing the crosswind arm and the main shaft. To do that, you just need a flat-bladed screwdriver to get that set screw out of there. And I'll lay that right on my table because I'm going to put it back in the axle after I remove this. A little bit of a twist and a pull, and that's how you get the arm off. And when you're doing a tune-up, you just want to do a good cleaning, a good re-lube. The reels seem to be working okay, maybe a bit sluggish, but overall okay. I'm going to take these 3 parts now, just going to put them right back in. There's a lot of little screws and things that come out of reels from time to time, and if you want to keep an assembly complete and not worry about, gee, was that a side plate screw, or did that belong, where did that belong, and so on, then it's kind of easy just to sort of put them together and put them in your parts tray so you don't lose them. Next up then is the crosswind block, and that's held on by a screw. I just needed to verify that by taking the grease off. Don't lose this little collar. You lose the collar, you can't make the arm work. So let's remove that, and then we can remove the screw that holds it down. Underneath that screw is going to be the anti-reverse gear as well, where it's a forked little anti-reverse dog. And be careful as you're taking this out to understand that that assembly is being held in. This is there's a spacer here, and then under that spacer is the anti-reverse mechanism. I like to make sure that anti-reverse is in the off position, that's the off position, so that when I go to put the gear in and out, that the main piece of that anti-reverse gear does not get in the way. So unfortunately with this one now, this whole assembly's got to come up. You walk it out like that. I don't know why I used the word unfortunately, that's just the way it comes. You'll notice on the back that we also took the bearing out. And this is your anti-reverse assembly from the back side. It has one of those forked tine anti-reverse dogs. This is a good time to take a picture. You don't have to take videos. You can take it on a digital camera, your cell phone camera, anything that is appropriate there. But notice which side is up and which side is down on this, so that when you go to reinstall, you don't have it backwards. So if you will, when it goes back in, you have the point of the dog going down. So this is the top side, and you're going to just clean up all that grease. Now this anti-reverse was working. It's not unusual with wear for these forks to start spreading out and losing grip on the piece. So if that's the case, just take a little pliers or something, just pinch it ever so slightly. You're not looking to close them down all the way. You don't want them back here. They do ride on that channel, but again, this one seems to be working fine, but if it's a problem, just kind of grab it and lightly pinch it, and you'll be fine with that. Okay, we said it was pointing down, so that's the orientation there. I'm going to clean this side up. And just get rid of the old grease. All grease is kind of the enemy of this stuff. I'm just going to grab a cotton swab. There's a little bit of all grease behind the main gear. Let's get that out of there. I'm inspecting the teeth of the main gear and the click rotor behind it as we're doing this. Just making sure that there's no broken teeth or anything like that that would impede the activity. So you want to just check, make sure it's not bent or kinked in any way. It does seem like there's a little bit of warp in this gear, but there's not going to be too much you can do about that. It may not be warp, it may be the way that it drives the spiral. But regardless, all of the teeth are there and they're not bent or somehow otherwise in bad stead. I'm going to put oil onto the bearing here that came off of the back side. Just give that a bath. And you'll notice I do have the parts on my table here because I do expect to put these back in pretty quickly. And I'm just kind of keeping them in kind of the sequence that I took them off. After they've been cleaned. And just get them out of harm's way. And then the last thing we want to do is come up top here then and do the service. So that should be a 10 millimeter. I'm hoping it's a 10 millimeter. Traditional counterclockwise removal. And we should be able to take the rotor off. And here we have a clip holding in the bearing. And assembly. So let's get the grease off first. And then you can look and see that there is a clip. Starts here, ends here, riding in a groove, holding in the pinion assembly. So I'm going to try and just see if we can't get that clip out easily. Okay, so I'm opting for a thin-bladed knife to pry from behind. And I got this started when I went to grab the knife. You can see how the clip comes up. If you just kind of put that knife in behind there, you're able to move that clip out. And just hold it. That's a spring and it's going to fly if you don't take care of that. I'm going to get this towel out of the way because it's starting to bump some of those parts. Now we can pull the shaft. Beautiful stainless shaft. Pull that bearing. Again, we're going to go back and clean off all the old grease. So Cons out in Arizona recommends using a toothbrush, an electric toothbrush. If you have any stubborn grease and grime and junk inside of here, I've tried it, it works nicely. And I would recommend if you're wondering how to clean some of these small grooves on stubborn reels, go ahead and grab your Oral-B toothbrush. Well, not the one you're going to use every day, but go ahead and grab one of those and you'll find that it's very good at getting into those little nooks and crannies, if you will, of those fishing reel gears and the like. All right, let's get the last of that grease out of the case here, and I'll show you how it all comes back together. This is a spring for your anti-reverse lever. Just be careful about that. It's pinned in, it shouldn't fly out. But if you find that it has separated, you're going to have to remove the pin to take it off. There's no reason in a typical servicing like this that you would need to remove that, but I just want to let you know if you have had problems with that, that's kind of where it goes. And you can see the pin now that I've cleaned it up. There's a pin right here that's holding that spring in. And you would have to remove that pin in order to replace that spring. And I've had to do that in the past. Alright, I'm going to take that bearing that came off the main gear and put that back into the case. We've had it soaking with the oil, but it doesn't hurt to put a little bit more oil on there. We've cleaned up our shaft now. The bearing can go back on that shaft. Just like we did with the other, inspect the spiral gear, make sure that all of the teeth are uniform, there's no chips or cracks or anything like that going on. And now I'm going to put some fresh grease onto the spiral gear. where it seats here. And I probably should have put some grease under here. So let's go ahead and, where that inside race of the bearing goes, we'll put a little bit of grease on there as well. Put that bearing back on. And now we can reinstall that. Kind of the installation is the opposite of the way we remove things. Press that down. And let's grab that little C-clip. You want to make sure that that first part gets into the groove. That's probably the hardest part of all. You want to hold, because this will fly if you don't do it properly. And again, it's not much pressure or tension, but there is some there, so be aware of it. I can go back on. The rotor, it's nice and clean underneath. If you needed to, go ahead and do that. There is a spring-driven dog under here, so you can put some oil on that. In general, you don't need to remove the bail, and I don't remove the bail if I'm just doing a basic service, but you can put some oil behind the seams there just so that it works easily. Check underneath to make sure that that dog is coming out. That's going to be the trip lever. And then we can go ahead and put that back on. And then we can tighten that up with that nut. That's why these things are right on the table here, because I expected to kind of put them back on pretty quickly. If I was going to walk away from the project, I would definitely put those into my parts tray. It's amazing what hits my desk and what makes things fly. But again, if you're doing this in kind of like I'm doing it here, where it's pretty much a non-stop action, let's give that a spin. That's a nice spin. It's working beautifully. I want to make sure we're all the way in the case with that bearing. Alright then, the next set then is this main gear. Like you said, had a lot of different things going on here with that. Let's make sure we get grease onto the gear that drives the crosswind block. Crosswind gear that drives the crosswind block. Let's get some on the main gear. Let's get some on where the shoulder of the bearing is going to go. Same with the other side. Remember what we said when we were looking at this, it goes this way. So you want to install your fork. Then you want to make sure you got it right, so make sure that it meshes properly there. And remember what we said, we were looking at orientation, and that point was down on the orientation. So we've got grease on the main gear, we got grease on the spiral gear. We can now go ahead and just put this assembly in, just like that. Then we had the collar. That was next. And we had our crosswind gear. Now we haven't cleaned the crosswind gear yet, so let's go do that. And check the teeth of the crosswind gear. Excuse me. If they're loaded with grease or anything, go ahead and get that cleaned out. You can use a wire brush or something else. We want to get some grease on the front, and we want to get grease on the back. And this is a little raised section here that's going to go inside that little plastic spacer. I'm using a brush hair there. So make sure that you get that properly seated when you go to put this on. Then we can grab our screw. I guess I didn't get that little hair out of there. So I used to use a screwdriver, and everybody told me to go use a brush. And I've had limited problems with the brush, other than every now and then it sheds. And I'm trying to use a high quality brush, an artist's brush, but every now and then it kind of just happens to lose a hair. Alright, let's get this screw back in. Hold on our crosswind gear. Those of you that know me in small pieces and parts kind of know this is always an adventure. So these reels have really stood the test of time. Nick sent me a couple of different versions. He sent me the 4200 and 4300 and the 5000, and they're all wonderful reels. They all get the job done. Look at that, you can turn it by your hand. Okay, without even doing much, we'll just show you how that's all working. And I wanted to remove the override here for that anti-reverse at this point. Just because I want to make sure the anti-reverse works. There you go. See how that fork is moving down there? This little leg here, you'll notice as we're going it's out, and as soon as you go back it's a friction driven anti-reverse, and that's what's stopping. So this is all right here. So I'm just gonna put that little last piece of the attach on here, which is a little bit of grease against the stud so that this little cap rides freely. Just like that. Then we go over to that assembly that we have. That's the axle shaft and crosswind arm. Beautiful metals here. I think they're probably stainless. If you haven't done so already, clean the shaft of the axle. Again, this one's pretty clean. Put a light coating of grease on there. Don't go heavy, because when you go through the pinion gear it'll only wipe itself out there. It's tight tolerances up top here. Insert that through. Go ahead and bring your crosswind arm on, set it over the stud. Kind of do the mating game here. Sometimes it's just easier to do it before you put it over the stud. Then you need to line the hole in the axle shaft. Trying to find it. There we go. I don't know why I'm having such trouble finding the darn hole there, but there we go. I think we finally see it. Just to pin to center it. I want to insert that screw. This one not totally centered yet. Once you start loading this in, all of a sudden you realize that the grease is making it slippery. And the shaft isn't staying set. There you go. I think we got it now. Alright, so we're going to tighten that down. Then we can get that case reinstalled. Again, if you want to, you can turn this and make sure the shaft is moving up and down before you go and do anything further. In this case, it's fine. We've already oiled the back bearing. Set this in then. Make sure that the case is not binding in any way. If it is, don't try and force the screws on. Make sure that it's nice and level. And again, I remember that there was one screw that was short, and that screw was by the handle. Always important to pay attention to that. You can crack a case, or you can put a screw in too far and it can interfere with some internal workings. That certainly happens on a Shimano reel like a Stratic, where they have a small screw holding down the level line piece, and if you put the large screw in, you lose the travel on the axle, and you wonder what in the world did you do. Well, that's experience speaking. I've done that, and just it's worth a world of time and energy if you just pay attention on the front end the way it came out. This is the last of the case screws then. And I'll just show you that that drag system again. I'm assuming that a lot of folks are just watching this for the 4300 and not the 4200 that was done earlier, so it pays all the heed to go do that. Alright, just going to put the handle on, make sure we got a nice performing reel. Well, you sure do. Make sure the bail is working. It certainly is. Alright, so this is a preset drag system, so once you set this thing, you can take the spool on and off without removing that and having to reset the drag. Very much like a Mitchell reel. And to service the drags, though, you have to take that adjuster knob off. So let's go do that. And I said this on the other video that we did on the 4200 because these are the same spool setups anyway. A lot of folks will come in and say, I have a problem with my drag system. And their problem will be that they have a malfunctioning drag. This doesn't, there we go. I don't think that plastic strip belongs there. That plastic strip does not belong there. I don't know why this wound up in this reel, but it did. But that plastic strip does not belong there. If you pay attention to the schematic, you should have a plastic washer, a metal washer, the forked dog kind of washer, and then the top. So I'm not sure why that's there. I'm going to send that back to Nick. And if this is there for some particular reason, you can put it back in, but right now I don't know. But a lot of folks will come in, they'll do this drag washer up top, they'll service it, and then they'll say, but I still have a problem. Well, sometimes it's that they haven't taken the full spool apart, and that's why the plastic washer is there, because it's missing below. So that seems to be what they did there. There should be a white collar washer here that's not. So there's kind of two ways to do this. You can go order it apart, or you can take this plastic washer and cut it down. And you know what? I think we're going to probably do that. But I'm going to stop the video for a minute, see if I happen to have one of these washers before we go too far. Okay, so I don't have one of those washers, and I'm going to go order one because that's the right thing to do. But I did want to show you, I get questions on this, particularly on the older reels. They're looking for the shim washer that may go on top of the click rotor on a reel, or something like this, and they figure that the whole reel is lost because they don't have a replacement part available for them. In this case, we had this plastic one. It just so happens I have another one that's kind of like that. And what you can do is you can grab the one that has the right hole to it, simply cut it out from underneath, and that'll be perfectly adequate for what you need to do. Now the right thing to do is go get them a new washer, and I'm going to go do that. But I just did want to show you that in a pinch, you can do that. You can also use any hard plastic, the side of a milk jug, the lid of a coffee can, anything that kind of has sort of a plastic, flexible plastic. It's got to be flexible, but a flexible plastic side to it you can in a pinch, or just as a kind of a bush fix, if you will, or just because the part isn't available, go ahead and do something like this and it will work. So let's just, we're going to pretend on this one, but I'm going to go order Nick the right washer. This washer then would go over it, which is the way it belongs. It would then go into the reel. Then you have your hard washer, and that's why I was wondering how this one could even work, because it was pressed in. It was riding on the lip here as opposed to riding inside. And you have your metal washer. And you have your kind of like, it looks like a drone, right? It has kind of legs on it. The legs go down. And we can put our preset or our drag adjuster on there. And just to show you, this will work. There we go. I want to lock that in. We'll tighten that all down. So Nick was telling me he had a problem. And the problem that he had, he thought, was that the bail was hitting the spool. Well, actually what it was, that shim washer wasn't there underneath that, so the travel on this spool was actually hitting the rotor. So when we replace that, that certainly will fix that as well. And we're just going to continue. So that was the issue there, and we'll go make sure that that gets fixed. There you go, we're dead tight on that one. Okay, so we're back for the exciting conclusion. I went to mysticparts.com and I was able to get the replacement washer for the bottom of this. So even though I showed you how to do a kind of a bush fix in terms of cutting one of these out of a paper plastic jug, whether you use milk jar or a coffee can lid or anything, it's always good to go with replacement. For one thing, you can see that it's thicker, and that'll make a difference as well. But these are set up so that they can hold better. Of course, it's original equipment, and you want to make sure that you do that as part of the deal. It's also going to fit the insert properly. So all we did was put the original washer back in. You'll see how nicely that fits into the tray. You want to make sure that you engage that little click mechanism there. And then just reinstall. So up top here we had the fabric washer and the keyed washer. Get those all set. Put this back in. This back on, and that should take care of our bottoming out of the spool, which was Nick's problem. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more of this type of video, please subscribe. There you go, look at the difference, right? No bottoming out at all. Make sure that it's tightened down so that we don't have the move, and that solves the problem. So if you're a first responder, again, thank you for everything it is that you do. Really do appreciate the service and support that you have given us during the pandemic. Same thing for the essential personnel and so on. Without you, we would be in far worse shape than we are today. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you. Have a great day.